content warning for this part is there is quite a bit of suicide baiting mentioned, both canon and non-canon. Thank you, and enjoy the reading. Welcome back to part 2 of The Fine Jar by Bright Shadow, read to you by Buggy Cass. Chapter 6. The Price of Forgetfulness. Koda's mysterious situation finally comes to a head, but he's got a small army of friends and one protective as hell teacher to see him through it. It's a Monday, a perfectly mundane Monday, right until he steps into the classroom. He takes attendance and settles into taking care of his homeroom business. Not even halfway through class, that niggling sense that something is wrong starts to bother him. He lets his eyes casually rove over his students, seeking out the trouble. No one is missing, thankfully, but he can pick out 6 who prick at his senses as too off to ignore. He's resigned, but unsurprised that Midoriya is one of them. Ida, slightly more of a surprise, but honestly, not by much. He's not friends with Midoriya for no reason, after all. Koda, however, is a complete surprise. Tokoyami, Jiro, and Sato he isn't expecting. But considering Koda is involved, he supposes it's less of a surprise than it should be. No one seems to be bleeding this time, thankfully. And he doesn't think any broken bones are involved, judging by the lack of pain and stiffness in the top suspect for those kind of injuries. But that only means he's going to have to work harder to figure out what's wrong. He examines all 6 of the current problem students in turn as class wears on, noting with some dread that the number of confused and worried students is only increasing in number as they form a chain of students picking up on their friend's worry and pass it on to another friend who passes it on to one of their friends, and so on and so forth. Like an infection spreading. Hero students, Aizawa thinks, as if he wasn't and isn't still the exact same way. Observation is a significant part of an underground hero's skills, and after so many years, Aizawa is good at it. Ironically, it serves him just as well in the classroom as it does in the field, helping him pick out the ones who actually know what's going on versus the ones who are only reacting to their friends being upset. Of the anxious students, which by now describes around half the class, he can pick out 3 who seem to actually know what's going on. Midoriya being one of them doesn't surprise him. Ida surprises him only slightly more than Midoriya, which is to say, not at all. Koda, however, surprises him so much he second-guesses his observation skills. Midoriya and Ida are different flavors of worried and angry. Both are quite clearly worried for Koda, constantly glancing over at him and catching each other's eyes when they think Aizawa isn't looking. However, where Ida seems shot through with an undercurrent of shock and indignation, there's a resignation to Midoriya that Aizawa really doesn't care for. Aizawa's going to go gray by the time his class graduates, and at least half of those gray hairs are going to be Midoriya's fault. Koda is adamantly refusing to look up from his notebook. Aizawa can hardly see his face, but he doesn't like the bits he can see. Eyes that are too bright, too shiny, trembling hands, hunched shoulders. It's worse than he was at the start of the year, and that's saying something. Aizawa purses his lips. Whatever's happening, it's clear. Koda is the center of it. By the end of homeroom, there's not a single student left who hasn't picked up that something is wrong. Every one of them is clearly stretching their patience to the limit, waiting for him to leave so they can dash over to their friends and figure out what's wrong before the next class starts. When Aizawa stands to leave, 19 pairs of eyes lock onto him, Koda still stubbornly refusing to look up as he carefully arranges his school materials on his desk just so. Usually, Aizawa promptly exits the room and wanders off in the direction of the teacher's lounge for a nap, or some time with Eri before he sets off to work on all the various little details and issues that are his responsibility as a homeroom teacher. Today he stands and says, Koda, Midoriya, and Ida, with me. The three boys startle and stand without protest, filing out the door ahead of him. Every set of eyes in the classroom follow him, burning with concern. Aizawa pauses in the doorway. Jiro, here's to yourself. Jiro scowls, but nods reluctantly. Outside the classroom, he runs into Hisashi, whose class is up next. Hisashi glances from the trio of boys to Aizawa with raised eyebrows. Aizawa shakes his head the smallest amount possible. Hisashi gives him a grin and a two-fingered salute, winking as he strides past to take control of the classroom. Aizawa lets himself relax just a tad, trusting Hisashi to take care of the rest of the kids while he handles this. Whatever this is. He leads the boys to an empty classroom down the hall. They settle into the unused desks, and he moves to stand in front of them. All right, he says as he crosses his arms. What happened? As one, Midoriya and Ida's eyes snapped to Koda, neatly confirming that the source of the unknown trouble is indeed Koda, surprising as it is. Koda flutters, flustered, and jerkily signs, It's not a big deal, it's nothing. Aizawa gives him a flat look. It's enough of something that it's got the entire class riled up. Koda shrinks. It was just a stupid prank. I'm fine. Jar. Koda's head jerks up. But I'm not hurt. His signs turn hesitant, confused. Physical harm isn't the only way to be hurt, and I've never seen you look less okay than you do right now. Koda's eyes stutter away from his. He twists his hands together, shoulders pulling in as he shifts to hold himself. Midoriya slides closer to him, reaching up to lay a careful hand on Koda's back. Koda jerks a little, surprised, but leans into the other boy. Aizawa waits. Koda shuffles. His hands start and stutter to a stop several times before he gives up and sends a desperate look to Ida, pleading. Ida moves forward, gently squeezing Koda's arm, and says, Sensei, if I may. Aizawa glances at Koda and the naked relief on his face. He nods. Someone, that is to say, Ida purses his lips. Rage colors his voice and lines his face as he struggles to continue. Midoriya and I ran into Koda on the way to class this morning, so we all walked the rest of the way together. And we were the first ones there, but... Ida's hands fist at his sides, tight enough that they tremble. Sensei, someone put a vase of white chrysanthemums on Koda's desk. Aizawa goes completely and utterly still. The tears gathering in Koda's eyes spill over, and he cries silently. Midoriya uses the hand not pressed to Koda's back to gently tug him into a hug, encouraging his classmate to curl as far into his arms as their height difference will allow. Koda goes easily, folding himself down to cry into Midoriya's shoulder. Ida raises his hand to Koda's back, his other hand fisted at his side as he shakes with rage. Angry tears fogging his glasses. I don't understand. Why, Sensei? Why would someone do that? He chokes out. Midoriya opens his mouth, shuts it, tightens his hold on Koda, tucking his chin closer to his classmate's head so that his wild curls fall over and cover most of his face. There are 1,001 answers to Ida's question, but Aizawa can't think of a single adequate one, let alone choke one out past the rage strangling him. He reaches out and squeezes Ida's shoulder again. The boy takes in a shaky breath, holds it a moment, and lets it out again, just slightly steadier than it was going in. He nods, reaching up to wipe the tears out of the corners of his eyes, and raises his chin, jaw hardening as he forces himself to steady. Aizawa breathes through his own anger, trying to get it under control. It's not fair. It's not fair that his students can't even be safe in their own damn classroom. He closes his eyes and counts to 10. Then he counts back down again. He does it over and over again until he can fold up all his rage and frustration and set them aside until he has time to deal with them. A time when he doesn't have 3 crying and upset students to take care of. No, wait. 2 crying students. Midoriya isn't crying. Midoriya isn't crying? Midoriya? If that's not some kind of red flag, Aizawa doesn't know what is. He mentally adds that to his list of problems to investigate once this situation is dealt with. Right. Alright. Aizawa claws himself into something approaching steadiness and dares try for gentleness. Alright. You two go tell the principal what you told me. I'll handle things here. Yes, sir, Ida says, voice tight and thick. But Midoriya frowns up at him. But, Sensei! He glances at Koda, still tightly held in his arms. I've got Koda. You go with Ida. Nedzu will need to talk to you both, Aizawa says, moving over to pull Koda into his own arms. Midoriya nods, hesitant, and reluctantly lets Aizawa pull Koda over. It's awkward, for all that hero work has accustomed Aizawa to getting clung to and cried on. Koda is not only taller and bulkier than him, but also literally nothing but hard edges. Plus, Aizawa can't even do what he normally does. Give the crying person a few hard pats and pass them off to someone softer and more suited to comforting ASAP. He's never been good at comforting people. It's always been what he considers his weakest point as a hero, and one he's never been able to correct. But, right now, as stupid and illogical as it is, he doesn't want to try to find someone to shove this task onto. In fact, he's pretty certain that if anyone short of Koda's parents try to pull Koda away from him right now, he'll bite their heads off. So, stupid as it is, he doesn't try to reach for his phone to find someone better at the hugging and shushing part of heroing. He just holds on to Koda, frantically searching for something, anything to say. You're all right, he says, his voice softer than he's ever managed to make it. You're all right, he says again, as Koda squeezes him harder and hiccups into outright sobs in response. He doesn't know how long Koda cries, or how many times he repeats dozens of comforting phrases he can't even tell are doing any good. Long enough that he almost regrets not following logic and finding Koda someone softer to cry on. Long enough that he's certain Ida and Midoriya have reached Nedzu by now and explained things to the principal. Possibly even long enough for Nedzu to have tracked down the perpetrators via security footage and be ready to make the next move. But no one comes to disturb them, not even when the bells signaling the end of Hisashi's English class and the start of the next class ring. At some point, Aizawa manages to coax Koda into sitting down with him. Straight down on the ground, Aizawa leans back against the large teacher desk. Koda curled next to him with as much of him as possible tucked into Aizawa's chest. Aizawa keeps talking until Koda's tears soften and peter off. He nearly doesn't realize when they stop entirely, trailing off mid-sentence as he clues in. Koda, he asks. No response. Aizawa pulls back, calling another quiet, Koda, once more. But Koda's breathing is steady and soft, slowing into sleep. Ah, he says, considering the new conundrum of what to do now. He's ready to give hoisting Koda onto his back and just crossing his fingers and hoping it won't wake him a chance, when there's a tentative knock on the door. Come in, Aizawa says after a minute. The door slides open, revealing Juro's sheepish face. Aizawa gives her a flat look. I thought I told you to keep your ears to yourself. I did! Aizawa raises an eyebrow, and yet somehow here you are, the motion says. Mostly, I didn't listen to the talking. I just, waited a bit and popped in every now and again to see if we know when you guys were done. We, he says. Juro winces, glancing apologetically behind herself. Sorry, Sensei, says Sato as he shifts into view. Tokoyami follows him from Juro's other side. Apologies, However, we were concerned for our friend, he says. He looks not the least bit apologetic. Aizawa sighs. Well, since you're all here, you can help me get him to the nurse's office. I'm sure recovery girls' infirmary cots are more comfortable than the floor. The students move forward, eager to help their friend any way they can. Between Dark Shadow and Sato, getting Koda tucked into a cot in recovery girls' domain becomes a lot easier. Once it's done, he shoos the reluctant trio away. You've got classes, he says as he tries to herd them out the door. It's our lunch break, Jiro counters, hovering in the doorway. Then go eat. He's not even awake right now, and he'll have wiped himself out too much to wake any time soon. Still, they hesitate. Don't worry, pipes up Nedzu as he pops up beside them out of nowhere. Sato shrieks, snags his friends, and leaps sideways. Nedzu grins with all his teeth, and Aizawa tries not to laugh. Sato sets Jiro and Tokoyami down with a sheepish apology. It's almost enough to make Aizawa laugh until he remembers the circumstances. Your teacher and I will take care of things here. You'll see your friend back at the dorms tonight. This won't take more than a few hours to resolve. With that, the kids are finally gently herded out the door. Aizawa glances over at Nedzu as the door clicks shut behind them. Jiro was smart enough to not risk the principal's ire by eavesdropping, so Aizawa isn't surprised that Nedzu doesn't bother to wait until even she'll be out of earshot before he launches right onto it. Our perpetrators are all rounded up. All that's left is for young Koda to wake up and collaborate with the security footage. Once he has, I'll have them out of their ears by tomorrow. Nedzu smiles. It's not a nice smile. Good, Aizawa says, allowing himself a moment of vicious satisfaction before moving on to more important things. How are Ida and Midoriya? Nedzu hums, head cocking. They both seem quite shaken up by this. I sent them along to Hound Dog. All three of them will need at least a few sessions with him. Nedzu nods. Yes, that seems quite prudent. No sense in letting anything fester. Small and furry I may be, but comforting I am not. No, I'm much better at the more technical aspects of resolving a situation. Speaking of which, would you care to fill out the expulsion forms while I contact Koda's parents? Yes, Aizawa growls, feeling a dark satisfaction. Paperwork, as a general rule, is horrible, but there are some forms he'll gladly suffer through. Nedzu grins again. I'll send it right over. He hops down from his chair and strolls back out the door, leaving Aizawa with a peacefully sleeping student and too much to think about. One particular thought has him reconsidering just sitting there until Nedzu returns. It shouldn't be too hard to make it to the dorms and back before Nedzu comes back. Should it? It's not. Even with his return trip slowed by the precious cargo he retrieves, he arrives and gets himself and his cargo settled before Nedzu's return. Although, from the glint in Nedzu's eye, that might not be entirely due to Aizawa's efforts. Still, he makes no comment of the extra occupant on Koda's bed, even when the rabbit pops its head up to peek over Koda at Nedzu's entrance. Nedzu leaves without comment, letting Aizawa cling to his dignity. By the time Koda wakes, Aizawa has long since finished the expulsion paperwork and has moved on to getting some grading in. It's Koda's rabbit who notices first, ears flicking up and scooping forward. It climbs free of where it's nestled itself in the dip between Koda's arm and chest, hopping onto his chest, whiskers tickling his chin. The boy blinks awake and stares, baffled, at the rabbit. He sits up carefully, arms coming up to cradle the rabbit so it doesn't fall. It takes a moment for Koda to notice Aizawa, eyes wandering around the room before finding him. Aizawa opens his mouth, but before he can figure out what to say, Koda shifts the bunny into his lap, lifts his hand and signs, I'm sorry. Aizawa closes his mouth. What for? He asks, already knowing he's not going to like the answer. I should have handled it better. Aizawa frowns. Handled being told people wished you were dead better? No, yes, Koda shakes his head and flaps his hands, waving the signs away. I mean, the bullying in general, It's not like I shouldn't have expected it would start happening again eventually. Koda signs on, hands moving faster and faster until Aizawa can barely keep up. I mean, I've always been bullied. I'm weird-looking and too quiet, and when I do talk, my voice is weird for my body, so I should have expected it would have started happening eventually. He's right. He doesn't like the answer. You expected to be bullied at UA. Koda nods, slow and uncertain. Aizawa does not sigh. He does not drop his face in his hands, no matter how dearly he wants to. How long has this been going on? Aizawa asks. Koda pauses to think about it, absently petting the rabbit. Maybe not quite 3 months. So, not much longer than the first time Aizawa had noticed something wrong. Well, at least he's not so much of a failure of a teacher he didn't notice something wrong with his students, even if he did completely forget to do anything about it. I'm fine, really, I can handle this, I promise. He gives Aizawa a wry little smile, like there's not a million things wrong there. Okay, first of all, jar again, because this is not fine. You are not fine. Second, Koda, I am your teacher. I am your homeroom teacher. Taking care of things like this is my job. Koda's hands twitch up like he wants to say something, but instead he just resettles them on his rabbit. Aizawa stops, raising an eyebrow at him and gesturing for him to go ahead. It's just that before, in all my other schools, the teachers always said that, well, that I should just ignore it, that they'll get bored and go away. Aizawa feels a burst of anger. And how did that work out? He says, doing his best to keep the anger from his voice. Koda grimaces. Not great, but there's not really a better solution, is there? Aizawa puts his growing rage aside and soldiers on. Of course there is, he says, picking up the folder of expulsion paperwork. Your teachers could have done any number of things. They could have separated the bullies from you. They could have moved you to a different class, if necessary. They could have called in the parents of the kids bullying you. They could have suspended the bullies. Or, he flips the folder open and lays it on Koda's lap. They could have done what UA has chosen to do and expel them. Any of that would have been better than doing literally nothing. Koda's eyes go wide as saucers. You're expelling them, he signs, hands shaking. Of course we are. We don't tolerate that kind of behavior at UA. But it was just a dumb joke, even if it was a mean one. Won't their parents fight the expulsion? And then they'll be angry and it'll be even worse, Koda doesn't say, but Aizawa can practically hear him think it. If their idea of a joke is telling another student to go die, then they're clearly not UA material. If their parents want to go up against Nedzu, then they're welcome to. They won't win, but I hope they have fun trying. Koda stares at him, jaw hanging open. In short, your teachers sucked, kid. They never should have put the responsibility of dealing with things like this on you. Koda, damn it, still looks uncertain. But even if I shouldn't have had to deal with it on my own when I was younger, shouldn't I be able to now? I mean, we've all dealt with worse, right? What are a couple of mean kids to villains willing to kill us? Aizawa feels like someone poured a bucket of ice down his costume. Koda won't look up from the rabbit in his lap anymore. Koda, that's not. He stops and sighs, running his hand through his hair. This class. They're going to be amazing, he has no doubt, but damn if they're not trying to kill him before graduation. Koda wilts in bed, cradling his rabbit in his lap as he strokes one finger down their head. Aizawa takes a moment to try and get everything in order in his head. Koda beats him to it, his hands picking out his words carefully. It's just that, this whole year, USJ, the summer camp, Camino, everyone has faced so much this year. Even the things I was there for, I'm only ever on the edge of things. I don't run forward like they do. Some of them, they don't even hesitate. Sometimes I look at them and I think I don't deserve to be in the same class as them. Do you think I'm a good judge of character? Aizawa asks. Koda starts, glancing up at him. Yes? Then trust me when I say you deserve your place in this class. Koda's eyes fall back down, and he shifts, uncertain. Aizawa raises his hand to his shoulder, squeezing briefly. Koda, he says seriously, drawing his student's eyes back up. If I didn't think you could make the cut, I wouldn't let you keep going. This profession is dangerous. There's no room in it for people whose skills can't meet their dreams and ambitions. Koda stares at him, his eyes wide and a little too watery for comfort. Being more cautious than your classmates doesn't make you a bad hero, just a different one. You don't hesitate where it counts. You are every bit the hero your classmates are, and you don't need to prove it to me or anyone else.
Koda chokes on a little sob and lurches forward.
Aizawa finds himself being hugged for the second time today, and raises his arms to return it, ignoring the growing damp patch on his shoulder. Careful, too much crying and you'll get so dehydrated Recovery Girl will force you into an IV. A little bubbling giggle makes its way free of Koda's crying, and he pulls back, wiping his eyes. Aizawa hands him a water bottle on the bedside table set there for just this purpose. You laugh, but I've seen it happen. Koda covers his mouth to muffle the laugh that threatens to burst out. Of course, that was a student with a tier-based quirk, but he doesn't need to know that, Aizawa thinks. Once Koda is ready, Aizawa gathers him, the paperwork, and the rabbit, and herds them all to Nedzu's office. Nedzu sits behind his desk. Koda's mother sits in one of the chairs. Koda's father on a video call pulled up on one of the many screens. Both look significantly weepy. Nedzu looks suspiciously ruffled, fur slightly damp. They're not 2 steps into the room before Aizawa finds out why, as Koda's mother springs to her feet and enwraps her son into an enormous hug. Once she's done, she turns to Aizawa. Koda-san, he says, before he can get more of a greeting out. She's moving forward and pulling him into a hug, leaping above his head and into his hair, feeling rather like a squashed cat. He awkwardly pats her elbow, the only part of her his trapped arms can't reach. Thank you, she cries. Thank you so much for taking this seriously and actually doing something about it. She releases him and steps back, smiling in spite of her wobbling lips. You're welcome, Aizawa says, trying to sound less stiff than he feels. Nedzu pulls a tissue out of the box on his desk and leans over to hand it to her. She takes it gratefully, blowing her nose and moving back to the chair. Aizawa guides Koda to the chair next to her with a gentle hand on his elbow. He moves to stand next to Nedzu as Koda releases his rabbit from its carrier to cradle it in his arms. It doesn't take very long to finish the expulsion process. Pulling up the bullies' parents on their own video calls to inform them of what is happening. They argue, but there's no getting around Nedzu's ironclad evidence, and every one of the people involved in the harassment campaign against Koda is officially expelled within half an hour. After that, all that's left to do is reassure Koda's parents that they won't be allowing this to happen again, with more than a few tears along the way. Enough that Nedzu has to reach into his desk and pull out a new box of tissues. Koda is completely exhausted by the time everything is wrapped up. He sways on his feet as his father says his goodbyes to them, before ending the video call. Aizawa was half expecting to make a dive for the boy and rabbit carrier as they walk Koda's mother to the gate. But they managed to make it all the way back to the dorm without the boy falling asleep on his feet. As they approach the dorms, Aizawa isn't the least bit surprised that they don't even make it to the door, let alone through it, before someone is throwing it open. Koji! Sato cries, as he half tumbles out of it. You're back! Tokoyami follows behind in his more dignified fashion. Are you all right? He asks, rushing on the heels of his words, his dark shadow piping in with a, We were so worried about you! Tokoyami quiets his quirk with a hand on the shadow creature's head. What he said, Jiro says, leaning against the door frame and feigning nonchalance as if it were obviously someone else's super hearing keeping an ear out for Koda's return. Aizawa raises an eyebrow at her. Her cheeks color, but she refuses to make eye contact. Yagorozu appears behind her, dropping a hand to her shoulder and to hover there delicately. You seem exhausted. Would you like me to make you some tea? Sato slings an arm around Koda's shoulders. I just pulled cookies out of the oven, too. I made your favorites. Aizawa watches Koda's friends, both the ones drawn to him at the start of the year and those that have followed, close around him, shouldering him up and gently hurting him inside. A smile threatens to curl his lips. He fights it back, tapping Momo on the shoulder before she can follow them. Don't let them keep him up too long. He'll be tired. And I don't think I need to say it, but don't push him to talk about it either. She smiles and nods. Of course, Sensei. Thank you. He raises his eyebrows. For looking after us, she clarifies, almost jumbling her words together with how quickly she rushes the words out. You always take care of us, even when we don't make it easy, so thank you. Maybe he's losing the fight against the smile that refuses to die. Maybe not. Either way, Yagorozu is a good student who won't tell anyone. You're welcome. Don't tell your classmates, but trouble or not, you're all good kids. It's worth it. She smiles back at him. He stuffs his hands in his pockets and tucks his face further into his scarf. Go on and join your friends. I'll see you all in class tomorrow. After she's gone, retreated back into the dorms to make Koda his promised cup of tea, Aizawa sits down on the bench in front of the dorms. He takes a moment to breathe. The night bugs sing, a few birds echoing them as they settle in for the night. The wind rustles the trees as the sun dips below the horizon, sky darkening enough for a few faint stars to twinkle in the growing twilight. If he closes his eyes and focuses, he can just hear the sounds of kids talking and laughing inside the dorm. It's not perfect. Everything isn't magically fixed just because they got rid of the bullies. Koda won't be back to normal in the morning. This isn't the kind of thing someone recovers from overnight. Few things are, but he'll be okay. He'll be better than he has been, and that counts for something. Ida and Midoriya will bounce back from the shock and upset of witnessing the event, and if they don't, well, Hound Dog is a much more capable counselor than he gets credit for. He'll help them process it and move past it, and if he can't, he'll find someone who can. No, things won't be fine in the morning, but they'll be moving towards it. Aizawa will take it and guard that progress towards okay against whatever next comes at them. Chapter 7. The inaugural meeting of the Nightmare-Induced Insomnia Club. The class starts the journey of getting their feet back under themselves. Aizawa laments the formation of the world's worst club, and wishes his students would find less injuring ways to bond. He also wishes his students would apply their manipulation skills to class and not to more recreational activities. The fact that Aizawa is expecting the class to behave like a pack of traumatized wolves closing rank around their wounded member doesn't make dealing with it any easier. It also doesn't help that Aizawa feels like joining them, honestly. Unfortunately, such behavior is considered unprofessional. Ridiculous. The next morning starts off about how he expected it to, with a few of his students poking their heads in to check that the classroom is free of any more nasty surprises. Aizawa is honestly not surprised it's Midoriya and Ida doing the scouting. But the only surprise they find is Aizawa is already there, stretched out behind his podium in his sleeping bag. He opens his eyes at the sound of the door sliding open. For a moment, he and his students just blink at each other, the students trying to process the disruption of the natural order and Aizawa waiting patiently for them to catch up. Then the boys remember themselves and blurt out hasty, if confused, greetings. Aizawa returns their greetings and goes back to his catnap, entirely unsurprised to hear someone start typing on their phone. No doubt they're letting the others know it's clear. Sure enough, Koda comes in not 10 minutes later, escorted by a thick cushion of friends. Some look sheepish when they meet Aizawa's eyes. Others, like Jiro, just raise their chins, as if daring him to say something. He doesn't, of course. Not even when the entire class starts traveling in packs, both during and outside school hours. Nor does he say anything about their new hypervigilance towards non-1A students. It's not like they're going around punching other students in the face or anything. It's nothing he can't live with, even if it is a bit like an oppressive cloud that has settled over his class. Even so, by lunch, he's ready to tear his hair out. Mostly because he spends his lunch period dealing with the fallout of Jiro accidentally breaking Shoji's nose because a business course student said something that might have been slightly mean-spirited about Koda. Shoji had to literally pick her up to stop her from breaking the business student's nose and ended up getting his own nose broken from a stray elbow to the face. Worse than that, there's something going on between Midoriya and Bakugo. Well, there's always something with those two, but it's something new this time, so it takes a while for him to notice what it is. They won't look at each other, won't speak to each other. It makes for a tension between the two that has Aizawa reaching for his phone and texting the other teachers that if they pair those two up for anything, they're dead to him. The situation does not improve as the week progresses. Tuesday night sees the formation of the Nightmare-Induced Insomnia Club, which means that Aizawa is checking the security feeds one last time before heading to bed when he spies 3 students out of bed and huddled around the common room seating area. Shinzo is one of them, which is fine. Because of his insomnia, Shinzo has permission to do whatever it takes to try and alleviate it. If that means sometimes he sleeps on the couches or in an armchair instead of his bed, then that's better than him not sleeping at all. But the other 2 don't have permission to have an impromptu sleepover in the common room. Which means that he has to put off going to bed to find out what's going on. Sighing, Aizawa rubs his tired, aching eyes and grabs his jacket. The front door of 1A's dorm opens quietly. But even so, when Aizawa steps inside, he finds 3 pairs of eyes already fixed on him. 3 bodies already tensed and ready to act, though they droop as soon as they realize it's just him. Aizawa finds himself torn between pride at how good their spatial awareness is, in spite of how tired they must be, and grief, because his students are somewhere they should be safe to relax in, yet they're still so alert that a door opening is enough to set them off. Aizawa gives no sign of this turmoil as he lets his eyes roll over the 3. Shinzo, already resuming a boneless flop, is sharing a couch with Midoriya, who resolutely stares at his own lap. He's sitting nearly bored straight, even though Aizawa can already see the starts of bags forming under his eyes. With how early he wakes up every morning to work out before school, he must be exhausted. So it's surprising and a little weird that Midoriya is sitting so perfectly at attention. Koda is in an armchair adjacent to Midoriya and Shinzo's couch. His rabbit flopped across his lap. He's not sitting in it so much as he is oozing into it, blinking heavy eyes. Still, he does his best to fret about his exhaustion, giving Aizawa a nervous little wave. All right, it's past midnight. I'm tired. You're all tired, and only one of you has permission to be out of bed at this hour, and that's for medical reasons. Explain. Welcome to the inaugural meeting of the Nightmare-Induced Insomnia Club. Membership is unwilling and attendance is mandatory, says Shinzo. Aizawa stares at him. Shinzo stares back with a dead-eyed stare of someone who hasn't slept in far too long. Aizawa turns to Koda. Koda raises his hands and signs. I had a nightmare and came down for tea. I found Shinzo down here, so I offered to make him a cup. And then Midoriya came down, and I offered him some too. And then you all just stayed down here. Sorry, Sensei. I'll clean up and go right now. Midoriya makes to stand, only for Shinzo's leg to shoot out, slamming into the arm of the couch like some bizarre safety bar. No, Shinzo hisses. If anyone tries to deprive me of Midoriya's 101 facts you didn't know about your favorite heroes ASMR, I'll have to take drastic action. Shinzo-san! Midoriya sputters, face burning so red it's nearly glowing in the dim lighting. I have been awake for nearly 3 days straight, Midoriya. If this is what it takes to avoid getting barred from training again, then so be it. But Shinzo sticks his other foot in Midoriya's face, cutting him off. No buts, only rambling. Midoriya shoves Shinjo's foot out of his face and promptly collapses over his leg, arms wrapped around his red face. Aizawa takes in the scene for a moment as he comes to a decision. Right. Well, so long as you don't leave the dorms, make a mess, or disturb the rest of the class, I don't mind if you stay down here if it's helping. And I want all of you to make sure you tell me or another adult if this doesn't improve. The boys agree, and Aizawa retreats, locking the door after himself and returning to his own welcoming bed. He gets up the next morning far too early and checks the security cameras. As his eyes skim over the 1A common room, he finds Koda and Shinzo right where he left them, both covered in blankets. His first thought is that, judging from the way Shinzo has one leg digging into his own spine, with the other nearly over the back of the couch and almost completely perpendicular to his body, he's clearly not pushing Shinzo as hard as he can in his flexibility training. His second thought, after glancing at the clock and noticing it's about time Midoriya is usually out for his morning run, is that he really hopes Midoriya got at least some sleep if he's sticking to his usual insane training routine. Aizawa encourages his students to train hard, but Midoriya trains like his goal is to deadlift the planet by graduation. He keeps an eye on the so-called nightmare-induced insomnia club over the next couple of days. It gains a few new members popping up once or twice, and usually hanging out for maybe an hour or two before heading back to their rooms to attempt sleep. Especially Bakugo, who will come downstairs, see Midoriya, and clench his jaw so tightly, Aizawa wonders why he can't hear it creak. On the other side is Midoriya, who sits tense as a drawn bow and stares anywhere that isn't Bakugo. That oncoming storm aside, only the original 3 are there every single night, so it's them that Aizawa is concerned about. At school they're fumbling, eye bags on everyone but Koda, and Aizawa isn't certain Koda's rocky skin can even get them. Shinzo manages to scrape together enough sleep that Aizawa doesn't ban him from training outright, but he does force him into a lighter schedule. And if Aizawa went by eye bags alone, Midoriya could be Shinzo's twin. Aizawa fights the urge to sigh loud enough to shake the school. It's very clear that all 3 of them need a reminder that asking for help is not a crime. As class moves forward, he mulls over what order to approach them in. He tallies up Shinzo's burning need to prove himself versus Midoriya's general inability to ask for help ever, alongside Koda's recent issues. But once he releases the class into the free period of homeroom, the part students like Ashido and Kaminari usually spend doing the homework they neglected the night before, 1/3 of his problem solves itself. Koda is slowly scribbling away at some kind of schoolwork, probably an essay that isn't due for at least a week, judging by Koda's usual study habits, when Tokoyami approaches. Aizawa keeps at least one eye on them, even as he pretends to be napping away in his sleeping bag. "What darkness hovers over your aura, my friend?" says Tokoyami. "Are you feeling okay?" asks Sato, serving as a handy translation to Tokoyami's elaborate speech patterns. Koda hesitates. For a second, his eyes flick to Aizawa, almost too fast to catch. Aizawa blinks impassively, playing up his sleepiness. The angle is bad, but he catches Koda's sign nightmare and sleep. Sato's face turns sympathetic, and Tokoyami nods. Jiro, previously leaning against Kaminari's desk and laughing at him as he frantically tries to finish what is no doubt next class's homework, abandons Kaminari to his fate to join Koda and the others. "What's up?" she asks the group as she leans against Sato's desk. "Koda didn't sleep much last night," Sato says.
Many demons assailed his attempts at rest, Tokiyami adds. Jiro blinks for a moment, mentally translating the Tokiyami task before saying, nightmares? You gonna talk to Hound Dog about them? Koda hesitates, and Jiro gives him a gentle prod with one of her ear jacks. Koda! Aizawa misses the first part of Koda's response and suddenly adjusts his position to get a better view of Koda's hands. Silly, going to him about a little nightmare. Lots of older students need him for more important things, Koda signs. Yeah, but not being able to sleep from nightmares is important too. Even if it's too much for him to handle alone, then he'll just get someone else to help you, right? Sato says. Tokiyami nods. Hound Dog is a skilled and experienced artificer of the mind. What he said, plus it can't hurt to bring it up, right? And if you don't want to talk to him, you can always text one of us when you can't sleep, adds Jiro. Koda squirms for a second, fretting before nodding. I'll talk to him at lunch today, if he's free, Koda signs. Aizawa makes a mental note to make sure Hound Dog will be free, or that there will be at least one of the teachers licensed for therapy available. 1/3 of the student problem down, 2/3 to go, he thinks. He turns his attention to Midoriya and Shinzo. On one hand, Midoriya never asks for help if he can avoid it, and often when he can't, or really shouldn't, try to avoid it. If Midoriya turns to an adult or even just one of his friends for help with his nightmares, Aizawa will eat his sleeping bag. But, on the other hand, Shinzo has insomnia. He doesn't get enough sleep as it is to be able to afford to lose it to nightmares as well. And he's gotten Shinzo to talk about his experiences with bullying at his old schools in his past. He won't necessarily open up right away. Shinzo has a need to prove himself as capable as his new classmates that runs deep. And Aizawa gets it. He really does. He was much the same at Shinzo's age, just without the adult figure that believed in him. So while he's confident he can get Shinzo to open up and let him help, he's not so sure that it'll happen quickly, just that it will happen. But Midoriya can't necessarily wait however long it takes for Shinzo to give up and accept that he needs help. Because while Shinzo will eventually give in, Midoriya will run himself into the ground trying to fix it himself and not once turn to anyone for help. Midoriya is undoubtedly closer to Yagi than he is to him. So Shinzo, and then if Shinzo doesn't crack right away, I'll flag Yagi down and set him on Midoriya. It's not a perfect plan. Yagi is often too soft on the kid, but he knows he can count on Yagi to do his absolute best to help Midoriya. Hell, with the way those two are, he might get lucky and not even have to set Yagi on Midoriya before Yagi realizes something is up with his favorite student himself. Plan made, he finds himself relaxing enough to drift off into a nap. Aizawa gets his chance to talk to Shinzo during the class's lunch period. A tap on the shoulder and a tip of his head pulling Shinzo away from his friends. He leads him to the teacher's lounge. More than a little used to seeing Shinzo with Aizawa, none of the other teachers give them a second look. He still leads Shinzo into the back room and closes the door to give them some privacy. You didn't sleep last night, Aizawa says as soon as it clicks shut, cutting straight to the point. Shinzo shrugs, crossing his arms. Do I ever? Not enough that you can afford to lose sleep to nightmares. Shinzo grimaces. There's not really anything I can do about it, so... He trails off with a shrug. Aizawa raises an eyebrow. You could try telling me you're having issues to start with. Shinzo scowls, eyes cast aside. I can handle it. And how are you planning to do that? He asks. Shinzo is tellingly quiet. You need help. Shinzo scowls harder. And there's nothing wrong with that. Easy for you to say, Shinzo says, his crossed arms tightening. Do you think I've never needed help? I've needed help plenty of times in my life, though I'll admit I've not always been the most graceful at accepting it. But the important part is that I did accept it. Shinzo's scowl wavers, uncertainly fighting through his customary blankness. Aizawa presses his advantage. You saw how I looked after USJ, right? Shinzo nods reluctantly. You think I didn't get help with those injuries? I had blocks for arms, and my entire face was mummified in bandages. But that's different. How? You got hurt fighting. This is just... He flips his hand through the air, an ugly kind of smile on his face. Just me being stupid. Aizawa raises an eyebrow. I doubt you're being stupid. I am, though. I wasn't there for it. I didn't see any of it. I only found out because I overheard Koda and his friends talking about it. I don't even know the details, just that someone left funeral flowers on Koda's desk. And I'm sitting here tossing and turning and having stupid little nightmares about something that had nothing to do with me. By the end, Shinzo's hands are down at his sides, clenched in tight fists, and his head is turned away as he glares off to the side. Aizawa watches him for a moment as the pieces come together. You told me that you were bullied in your previous schools. A tight shrug is Shinzo's only answer. You mentioned specifically that your bullies preferred non-confrontational methods, so they didn't have to worry about you retaliating. I mean, yeah, mostly because my dad said I should fight back and they'd back off. So I did. But all that did was get me in trouble, and then they just started doing stuff like that instead. Aizawa stuffs down the spark of rage that ignites. You've gotten funeral flowers on your desk before. A couple of times, I guess. Then it makes perfect sense that something like this would give you nightmares. Shinzo opens his mouth to argue, but stops himself and thinks for a moment. Okay, maybe you have a small point. Aizawa gives him a dry look. Shinzo huffs. I've been sleeping a little, though. Enough to train, at least. I know. I'm not trying to bar you from training. But it's clear this isn't getting better on its own. I can handle it. There's no need for you to handle it alone. You've got me, the rest of your teachers, and Hound Dog or one of the other counselors. And if you want to talk to someone outside of UA, that's easily organized. Shinzo wavers, his resolve cracking. Aizawa puts his hand on his shoulder, prompting Shinzo to meet his eyes. My door is open, Shinzo, whenever you need me. Even when you're sleeping? Shinzo jokes. Yes, Aizawa answers seriously without missing a beat. Shinzo's eyes widen a bit, put off his rhythm by Aizawa's quick and honest reply. I want you to succeed, Shinzo. Some lost sleep is more than worth that. Considering Aizawa values sleep more than money, that's worth a lot. Enough to crumble the last of Shinzo's defenses. Shinzo's shoulders slump. His arms stay crossed but loosened, so he's more half-hugging himself than anything. It's just, caught me by surprise. I haven't had to deal with anything like that since coming to UA. So I guess with how preoccupied I've been with transferring and catching up, I just sort of forgot to worry about it, Yeah, Aizawa says when Shinzo looks up to him for acknowledgement. I've had to deal with bullies pretty much for the entirety of my life, right? And then I got into UA and I wasn't close to anyone in my old class, but they weren't mean or anything. Didn't even ignore me, weren't scared of me, just didn't treat me different. Like I was just another classmate to them. And then I got into the hero course, and aside from Bakugo, I don't think anyone in this class knows what a stranger is. I've got actual friends now, and everything has been so different. I just sort of forgot that this sort of thing happens. Aizawa nods, a hand on his shoulder, steering Shinzo to the couch. Shinzo sits and Aizawa settles beside him. Normally, he only spends about a quarter of his lunch period actually eating. Another quarter goes to homeroom management and coordinating with other teachers. The final half he usually spends napping. Even so, he gladly gives up half of that time letting Shinzo talk about all of the things that have been weighing so heavily on him during the day that they resurface at night as nightmares, making sleeping that much harder for the insomniac. By the end of it, Shinzo isn't quite sold on the idea of therapy, but he's willing to think about it. And he's at least talking about what's bothering him, even if it isn't to a professional. That's enough that Aizawa is willing to call it a success. All right, Aizawa thinks. Now to tackle the problem child. Naturally, this means Midoriya lives up to his nickname and makes everything twice as hard as it needs to be. Aizawa is perfectly prepared to give up the remaining half of his lunch period to talk to Midoriya. But when he returns to the lunchroom, he can't find a head of curly green hair among the crowd. Just Tsuyu and some other students that aren't part of his class. Yagi must have grabbed him for lunch again, he thinks with a sigh. Maybe I'll get lucky and he'll be able to get him to talk. Yes, young Midoriya had lunch with me today. I noticed he looked pretty tired. I wanted to ask if there was anything I could do to help, Yagi huffs, fond and exasperated. But he told me that he was just up to hero forums too late last night. Yagi's face falls as Aizawa grimaces. That's not what it was it? He's been up the past few nights with Shinzo and Koda. They're calling themselves the Nightmare-Induced Insomnia Club. Or at least Shinzo is. The painfully sad look on Yagi's face makes Aizawa regret speaking. I'm going to talk to him before their end-of-day training session. I'll let you know how it goes. And then Aizawa makes like an emotionally competent adult and flees. No one is brave in the face of a sad All Might except the most vile of villains, okay? As the school day comes up on its final leg, the bell dismisses the class for end-of-day training. Everyone jumps up in an excited rush to grab their costumes and get to the gym. Midoriya, a word, Aizawa calls out before the boy can escape out the door with his friends. Midoriya stops, looking surprised and anxious. But when his friends glance back at him, worried, he turns a smile on them and shrugs. They reluctantly continue, casting more worried looks back as they go. Uraraka catches Aizawa's eyes, gaze flickering from Midoriya and back to Aizawa. He gives her the smallest of nods, and she relaxes, relief overlaying her worry. She helps usher the others away, brightly chattering something Aizawa is too far away to make out. Once the classroom is empty, Aizawa turns to Midoriya. Midoriya is watching him right back, but the moment Aizawa's fall on him, he doesn't quite flinch. But it's something. Like he's folding himself up, almost. He's still meeting Aizawa's eyes, but there's just something off. It doesn't make sense, but then Midoriya is a tangle of contradictions, and every time Aizawa thinks he's figured them all out, he turns around and there's something else. With a mental sigh, Aizawa tucks those observations away for later and focuses on Midoriya's current most pressing issue. The nightmares haven't gotten better, have they? Aizawa asks without preamble. Midoriya stiffens and shifts, hesitating before finally saying, No, not really. Have you spoken to anyone about them? Aizawa asks, even though he already knows the answer. Sure enough, there's a long pause as Midoriya brings his hands together, eyes dropping to them. Do you want to tell me about them? Midoriya doesn't quite freeze, but Aizawa is watching him far too intently to miss how his nervous hand-twisting slows, how small and deliberate his movements become. He realized Midoriya isn't looking at his hands, or if he was, he isn't anymore. No, he's watching Aizawa, eyes just high enough to see him without being obvious about it. Odd, Aizawa thinks, and files that away with the rest of the things that don't make sense about Midoriya and paint a picture that Aizawa can't quite make out yet. It's... Midoriya's eyes rove as he stutters, but never quite far enough that he can't still watch Aizawa. He knows because Midoriya immediately freezes the moment Aizawa reaches out to set a hand on his shoulder. Midoriya, I'm not going to force you to tell me. Midoriya's eyes jerk up and fully meet Aizawa's again, wide with surprise. I don't like that, Aizawa thinks. Do you want to tell me? He asks. Something careful comes onto Midoriya's face, and Aizawa doesn't miss how tense he is under his hand as he softly answers, No, Sensei. Immediately, Midoriya's eyes drop, any confidence in his posture slipping away as he whispers, Sorry. There's nothing to be sorry about. They're your nightmares, and you don't have to tell me about them if you don't want to. But you need to talk to someone. Midoriya grimaces. Aizawa huffs. Don't make faces. If it were one of your friends, would you want them to just sit there and suffer? No, Midoriya mumbles. Exactly. Your friends, your teachers, your mother, any of them would be happy to listen. He pauses and takes a moment to watch Midoriya. Midoriya stares at his hands, picking at his nails. Occasionally, his eyes wander up enough to return to sneakily watch Aizawa. Silent. Aizawa is beginning to hate it when Midoriya is silent. It never seems to mean anything good. What's with this class refusing to talk about their problems? Aizawa thinks, disgruntled. What's the worst that can happen if you talk to someone about this? Midoriya shrugs, still silent. Aizawa takes a deep breath, digs deep, and grits his teeth. Back when I was a little older than you, something bad happened and I started having nightmares. Bad ones. It got so bad that I got hurt. Mike and I made a deal then that when I have nightmares, I come to him and either tell him about them or get him to book me a therapy appointment. Midoriya's head slowly rises until he's staring right at Aizawa in open-mouthed shock. He crouches until he's more or less level with Midoriya. So I might not know what your nightmares are about, but I know what it's like to feel like you can't talk to anyone about them. And I promise you that no matter what they're about, there's someone who will listen. So just talk to someone about them. Anyone. All right, problem child. Tears wobble to life in Midoriya's eyes, but he holds them back with what's surely enormous effort and nods with a soft, Okay. He gives Midoriya's shoulder a squeeze and then lets him go, sending him off to join with the rest of the class. He takes a minute or two to get his own things together before following. By the time he gets to the gym, they're training in today. Yagi already has them engaging in miniature mock battles, a few people in each group laying siege to one another. Aizawa comes to a stop next to Yagi. The man is practically vibrating, and Aizawa isn't surprised at all when it takes all of 2 seconds for him to blurt out, How did it go? I talked to him. Yagi waits, very nearly fidgeting like a certain nervous student. These two. Every day I get closer and closer to believing Todoroki's crazy theory. Went okay. He didn't want to tell me what they were about, but I got him to agree to talk to someone. I'll try asking him then. Maybe after training? Let me know how it... Their talk is interrupted by a burst of frantic yelling. Both teachers jerk toward the noise to find Sato hauling himself up off Uraraka. Uraraka doesn't follow him up. Without a word, Yagi calls a stop as Aizawa jogs over. Thankfully, by the time he gets close, she's stirring. Not standing, but reaching a probing hand to her side. Sato, nose bleeding and both eyes blackened, hovers over her. What happened? Aizawa asks. I landed on her and heard something crack. Okay, it's okay, Sato-kun, Uraraka chirps, her face pallid and gray with pain. Jar, Aizawa says, but there's an odd echo. He stops, turns around, ignoring Yagi's muffled guaf to stare at his impromptu chorus. He can tell exactly which students called out Jar along with him, because they're all standing there awkwardly with embarrassed faces. Is this progress or just another tactic to drive me insane, he thinks. Shoji, take her to the nurse, please. Uraraka, we'll figure out you're fine once Recovery Girl patches you up. And Sato let me see that nose. Uradaka whines sadly as Shoji quickly but carefully lifts her up and carries her off. It's fine, Sensei. It's really not that bad, Sato has the audacity to say around a nose so broken it's nearly at a 90-degree angle. Aizawa shoots him a glare as he examines it with careful hands. Jar? Sato asks meekly. Jar, and I'm sending you to Recovery Girl as well. He pulls a travel pack of tissues from one of the many pockets hidden on his jumpsuit and shoves them in Sato's hands. Do you need help getting there, or are you good on your own? I can get there okay, it's just my nose. With the excitement over, he and Yagi corral everyone back into focusing on training. But because neither 1A nor Aizawa are allowed to catch a break, it's then that Ida decides that arm breaking is a Deku Squad bonding activity. He clips a concrete wall running at his top speed, sending him flying off into Asui and Aoyama. Ida shrieks as he goes, and Aizawa is already running. By the time he gets there, Ida is sitting up and frantically asking Asui and Aoyama if they're all right. Injuries? Aizawa asks. It's nothing serious, Sensei, says Asui, just as Aoyama bites out. My sparkles shine on, unhindered, through clear pain. Ida, the last bastion of his sanity, dashes Aizawa's hopes to the floor with an, I'm fine, Sensei, but I am sure I injured Asui-san and Aoyama-san with my careless behavior. Aizawa's eye twitches rapidly. Try again, he growls. The trio glance nervously at each other. Well, Aoyama glances nervously at Asui, who looks back at him, as fairly blank-faced as ever, while Ida is busy looking horrendously guilt-ridden. Aoyama breaks first. My arm is a bit more broken than implied, he says meekly. My arm is broken as well, Asui admits. Better, Aizawa says with a nod, and then turns his burning gaze on Ida, who drops his eyes, biting his lip. Ida. It's broken, and dislocated, I think. But I can bear with it long enough to make sure Asui... Call me Suyu-chan. Suyu-chan and Aoyama get help first. Unnecessary. Not only is Recovery Girl perfectly capable of handling all three of you in there, there's also no need for you to punish yourself for a training accident. But their arms! It was an accident. Besides, at least you didn't stab them. Though in the future, I would prefer if you and the rest of Midoriya's friends found a better way to bond than breaking bones. Ida sputters. Asui lets out a croak that Aizawa takes for laughter, and even Aoyama muffles a chuckle with his good arm. Also, that's 100 yen for each of you. The class switches to one-on-one sparring in the hopes of avoiding sending the entire class to the nurse again. If it doesn't work, Aizawa is fully prepared to blame Yagi and run while Recovery Girl hunts them for sport. Right now, Yagi is out on the training floor, adjusting positions and offering tips. He's more surprised than he should be at how much Yagi has to teach the students from a tactical and technical perspective. Too many people forget that there's more to All Might than just hitting really hard. With the level of power All Might once wielded, there has to be. The man could cause weather patterns with a single punch. Aizawa shudders to think of an All Might with no head for moderation and tactical restraint. 13 taught the students that their quirks have the potential to be deadly. Now Yagi teaches them how to balance on the thin line of holding back enough to not kill or maim their opponent by accident, without holding back so much that the people they're protecting or they themselves are put at risk. It's a delicate line, one All Might spent decades dancing on. Aizawa isn't sure what motivated Yagi to decide to become a teacher, and honestly, he wasn't too keen on the idea at first. He's never been fond of All Might. Appreciated the man and understood his importance, yes, but on a personal level, he didn't exactly expect to like him. But he likes Yagi, and now that the man is getting his feet under him as a teacher, he finds himself much warmer towards the idea of teaching alongside him. Yagi has a lot he can teach future heroes, assuming he sticks to it. Aizawa finds himself hoping he does. Miraculously, the class manages to get the rest of the way through training without any more injuries. They clean up and head back for homeroom. By the time Aizawa dismisses them for the day, Midoriya is practically vibrating, no doubt dying to visit his friends in the nurse's office. He leaps from his seat and nearly bolts out the door, but freezes and turns toward Todoroki at the last moment. Todoroki, heading towards the other students with classroom duties, waves him on with an "go ahead without me." That's all the permission Midoriya needs to bolt out the door and down the hall towards the nurse's office as fast as he can without technically running. The teacher's lounge is in the same direction, so Aizawa follows after him, intent on snagging a nap and getting as close to catching up on paperwork as possible. That's how he comes to see Yagi following Midoriya into the nurse's office. He climbs into his sleeping bag and settles into his desk chair, dropping his head face down onto the desk. Some time later, he hears the door to the teacher's lounge open, followed by Yagi and Midoriya's voices, pitched low out of politeness. The door to the back room opens and closes, swallowing their voices, and Aizawa returns to dozing, mentally crossing his fingers. He almost dozes off properly before he hears the back room door open again. Sneakily, he shifts enough to peek out from under the sleeping bag and hair to sneak a look at the pair. Midoriya's eyes are red and puffy, but his face is dry and smiling. Yagi's hand rests on his shoulder, protective and comforting. There's a soft look on his face. Midoriya looks lighter than he has in days. Good, Aizawa thinks, closing his eyes and finally properly drifting off to sleep. "There he is!" a too cheerful voice interrupts his napping. Aizawa opens his eyes and thinks of murder, his face still smushed into his desk. "He's sleeping," whispers Eri's soft voice. Aizawa sets his murder thoughts aside for later and lifts his head. "Morning, sleepyhead," Nemuri says, Eri balanced on her hip. Technically speaking, Eri's a bit too big to be carried around everywhere, but she likes it in her own quiet way. And the UA staff have determined that if Eri likes something, then, if at all possible, she should have it. And so, everyone has memorized the subtle cues Eri gives off when she wants to be held, and indulge her at every opportunity. "Yo," Aizawa says, wiggling to unzip his sleeping bag enough to free his upper body. "Hi," Eri answers. She must shift in that minute way that means she wants down, because Nemuri bends over and sets her on her own feet. Eri slides out of Nemuri's arms and immediately slips up to Aizawa's chair, her tiny hand settling on the arm of it, scant inches from Aizawa's hand. He turns his hand over and she grabs it, a bit too fast to be simple habit. Her head is tilted just enough to not be watching his lap, eyes fixed on the desk like she's trying to keep him there. "Wanna come sit with me?" Aizawa asks, angling the chair towards her in invitation. Eri lets out a shaky breath, the tension leaking out of her as she climbs up. He helps her settle, pulling her up and lifting the sleeping bag so she can slide her legs in with him. She grabs the zipper herself, carefully pulling it up and wiggling around until the only thing that's sticking out is her head. Nemuri coos, and Aizawa looks up to see her quickly tucking her phone behind her back. He narrows his eyes at her. She grins. "I was absolutely recording that," her smile says. He glares at her, trying to project the thought, "I know where you sleep." She just grins wider. "Aw, look at you two, all tucked up and ready for a sleepover," Nemuri says. Eri looks up at her, brow crinkling. "What's a sleepover?" she asks. Nemuri's smile doesn't drop, but Aizawa can read her well enough to see the sadness tucked away in her eyes as she explains the intricacies of a sleepover to Eri. She's still explaining when Yaoyorozu and Ashido come in. Ashido is pouting. Yaoyorozu's apologetic but firm expression all but broadcasts the fact that she's doing class duties with Ashido to make sure they actually get done. But all that is wiped away the moment they spot Eri bundled up in the sleeping bag with Aizawa. Her head, tucked up under Aizawa's chin, is the only visible part of her. Yaoyorozu presses a hand to her mouth, eyes sparkling. Ashido is bouncing on the spot so fast she's practically vibrating. So cute, she hisses. And then she realizes what Midnight is talking about, and Aizawa swears he's about to watch his student clip through the floor out of excitement. Oh, sleepovers! I love sleepovers! She practically bounces and plays. Man, it's been so long since we've been able to have one! Ashido deflates theatrically, slumping against Yayorozu. Save life's rep! You like sleepovers? Ashido asks, face mischievous. Yayorozu bites her lip, sensing the trap, but still conflicted. I've never actually been able to have one myself, but they've always sounded like a lot of fun, she says at last, giving in and letting herself be dragged into the distraction. Ashido's mischief fades to shock as she gapes at her. Oh my gosh, no! We have to throw one! Ashido whirls and turns puppy dog eyes on Aizawa. Sensei, please, can we have one? Half of Aizawa wants to refuse. He already has half his class rotating in and out of the common room all night long from nightmares. The last thing he needs is the chaos of a sleepover. But the rest of him thinks about how, in spite of being kids, his class doesn't get to act like kids often. It might go a long way to helping them put the Koda situation behind them, he muses. Like a shark sensing blood in the water, Ashido zeroes in on his conflict and delivers a precision strike straight to the weakest point of his armor. If this were training, he might not be able to hold back his proud grin. Ari-chan, don't you think a sleepover would be fun? Fuck, Aizawa thinks. An excited little bounce escapes Ari before she stifles it. She mumbles. Aizawa looks down at her and knows he's fucked. She's got her head tilted back, looking up at him. Her eyes are big and round, longing, but the rest of her face is tense with the expectation of being told no. He can feel everyone's eyes boring into him. Is it okay? She asks, shrinking deeper into the sleeping bag. Sure, he says, cursing his inability to deny Ari anything she can reasonably have. Yes! Ashido cheers, actually jumping in the air with both hands punching up. Yayorozu lifts her hands as if to calm her, but there's no denying the excitement lighting her up as well. And Namuri? Namuri is smirking at him. You're so soft, says her expression. He cuts his eyes at her, thinking shut up at her as hard as he can. She just grins wider. Ashido takes planning the perfect sleepover more seriously than she does all of her schoolwork. She spends a good 5 minutes hyping it up with Ari, giving the girl all kinds of ideas of what they might do at a sleepover, before Yayorozu remembers herself. She practically wails as Yayorozu all but drags her off to finish their portion of the classroom duties, but recovers when Yayorozu points out there's plenty of their classmates who will want to be involved too. When he checks in on the kids that evening, he finds them all in the common room. It looks more like people planning a war than things hanging out. It's chaos. Pure chaos. Sato and Bakugo look nearly ready to go to war over a proposed menu. For a sleepover! The girls and Aoyama are huddled up, ignoring the very loud arguing from Sato and Bakugo as they shoot ideas around at deadly speeds. Midoriya is taking notes, pen moving at blinding speed. He's already filled 3 notebooks. Without stopping his pen's frantic movement, he reaches out and taps Yayorozu's side. She doesn't even pause outlining the best method to comb potential movies for possible triggers as she activates her quirk, a fresh notebook emerging from her thigh. It drops into Midoriya's waiting hand as he fills his current notebook. Midoriya smoothly exchanges the old notebook for the freshly created one with a mumbled thanks. Aizawa watches this entire exchange, dumbstruck. There are at least 4 other conversations going, ranging from anything from makeover plans to the best way to arrange the furniture for maximum movie-watching comfort. Aizawa blinks. No, thank you, he thinks, rapidly counting heads so he can retreat before he's noticed and doubtlessly dragged into the insanity. Why did I say yes again? Aizawa wonders as he heads for his own dorm apartment. Then he opens his own door and finds that Ari's belongings seem to have exploded all over the apartment. Ari herself is seated at the couch with Mirio, watching a movie on the laptop with laser focus. Her favorite backpack is in front of her. Mirio looks up as the door shuts behind Aizawa and smiles. Hey, Aizawa-sensei! What's all this? Aizawa asks. Eri looks up, a nearly comical level of seriousness on her face as she says, Sleepover research, and returns to her focus on the laptop. I see. Murio's grin widens. Eri and I are planning on what to take on the sleepover. Want to help? Part of him wants to point out that it's a 5, maybe 10 if you're slow, minute walk between his dorm apartment and 1A's dorm. And if Harry really needs anything, they can just walk over and get it. But underneath her serious focus, Eri looks too excited for Aizawa to seriously consider bursting that bubble. Sure, he says instead, and picks his way over to the couch. Right, he thinks. This is why I'm indulging this insanity. Chapter 8. Rose-colored memories and other dangers. The super sleepover extravaganza is on, and the class is determined to make sure Eri has a wonderful time. They've considered every single detail to make sure Eri has a happy and safe evening, except that kids absorb every single word you tell them, and one stray tale is enough to plant a dangerous idea in their heads. The super sleepover extravaganza, as Ashido calls it, is all he hears the class talk about for the rest of the week. It seeps into everything. Training exercises become battles between movie choices. Students shrieking the names of movies across battlefields and in the middle of fights. And Sato and Bakugo are officially at war over a menu for a sleepover, turning the kitchen into a battlefield of its own. The class has gone as far as rearranging the furniture in the common room to make planning easier. The first time Aizawa sees it, he thinks he stepped into a war room and not his student's dorm. It's enough to make Aizawa almost regret agreeing to it. Almost. Because there's Eri. Eri, who is just as excited, if a good bit quieter about it. Tucked into the front of Aizawa's sleeping bag is Eri's new favorite spot. Power Loader makes her a lap desk that folds up into a pocketable square so she can sit there and draw while Aizawa does paperwork at his desk. Every time he feels his sanity slipping, like it does during the third fire this week alone that Sato and Bakugo have set with their arguments, or the continued tension between Bakugo and Midoriya, he glances down to see Eri carefully drawing another sleepover-themed drawing rendered in neat crayon lines, and remembers why he's allowing this madness. Though it feels like Saturday will never arrive, the week crawls by until it inches up on Friday morning. And then all Aizawa has to do is get through this one last day of school with a class of students so excited he thinks they might be vibrating. The final bell rings and the class scatters so quickly he feels wind whip up. The unlucky souls assigned to class duties speed through them as the others bolt off to finish last-minute prep. Aizawa walks slow as he goes to fetch Eri. Mirio watches over Eri at the teachers' dorms. He's doing his best to distract her from her nerves by dramatically lamenting missing her first sleepover due to a long-ago scheduled family visit. Eri clings to a bulging, fluffing pink kitty backpack with enormous glittery green eyes. A gift from Hisashi, and the closest thing they've been able to give her to a toy, thanks to Chisaki. Right now it's clear Chisaki is the furthest thing from Eri's mind. She's so excited she doesn't notice Aizawa come in. But the moment he knocks softly on the wall, her eyes snap to him. They brighten and she bounces a little before making a valiant effort to stifle herself. Ready to go? He asks, even though he knows full good and well that she's packed, unpacked, and repacked that bag over a dozen times, and probably did it a few times more while he was working. She nods quickly, and he holds out his hands. Take lots of pictures for me, Mirio calls, waving enthusiastically as they go. In spite of her excitement, Eri walks quietly beside him. Aizawa tries not to think about where she learned that, focusing instead on where Eri is today, on her way to her first sleepover, and so excited she could pop. When they reach the dorms, half of 1A is either outside or plastered to a window. A cheer goes up. He knows the moment Eri spots Midoriya, waving at her from where he stands next to Ida, because her composure finally breaks. She bounces on her feet for one brief moment before remembering herself and forcing herself to still. But Aizawa can practically feel the excitement radiating off of her. A smile twitches at his mouth. "Go ahead," he says, letting go of her hand. With a quiet exhale of relief, she bolts towards Midoriya. "Deku-san!" she cries as she runs. Midoriya grins and kneels to catch her in a hug. "Hey, Eri-chan!" he says as he scoops her up and stands, shifting her to his hip. He carries her inside. Aizawa follows behind him with her bag, steeling himself. The plan is for Aizawa to stick around until the evening, just to be sure Eri doesn't get too nervous and back out. It means he gets pulled into the sleepover shenanigans, but it's a necessary sacrifice to make sure Eri's first sleepover is a success. Still, he's glad Namuri and her vicious camera skills aren't here to memorialize the lopsided pigtails held in place by glitter clips. His students seeing it is bad enough. The fact that none of his students make one peep about it gives him some hope for their intelligence. It doesn't mean he's unaware of some of the sneaky pictures they're all taking. The joke is on them, though. If any of this gets out, well, none of them are much better off after the makeover spectacular segment of the Super Sleepover Extravaganza, and Aizawa has the security footage to prove it. Still, he makes sure to glare Kaminari down when he catches the boy trying to subtly angle his phone towards Aizawa, while Hagakure shows Eri how to get the shimmering yellow nail polish on Aizawa's nails and not his fingers or the furniture. Midoriya is especially decorated, his mess of curls looking like he stuck his head in a pit of hair-clip-shaped piranhas. Aizawa is pretty sure Eri managed to get a clip on every single one of Midoriya's curls, thanks to Yayorozu providing her with an endless supply. She even managed to wrangle 2 chunks of his hair into something approximating braided pigtails. They're too high on his head and weirdly stiff, sticking out like lumpy, uneven antennas. Aizawa has plans to confiscate a photo from whoever managed to get the best one and send it to Yagi. It'll make a nice addition to Yagi's so-called secret collection. With the class sparkly enough to make Aoyama weep tears of pride and joy, they move on to other classic sleepover activities. Board games, card games, truth or dare. Scary stories are substituted for fun and or embarrassing childhood tales, the class having unanimously voted that Eri has been frightened more than enough in her short life. Yayorozu shares the time she met an important business partner of her parents and got so nervous she accidentally spawned so many Matryoshka dolls she flooded an elevator. Ida shares the story of how he simultaneously activated his engines for the first time, broke his brother's collarbone, and lost his first tooth by crashing into his brother and knocking them both down the stairs at a hero gala in front of thousands of cameras. But of all the stories, Eri is predictably the most enraptured by Midoriya's story of climbing to the top of the tallest tree in his local park and watching the sunset when he was 10. Midoriya keeps the details on why exactly he decided to climb a tree in the middle of the day and then stay up there until the sun set, but Eri doesn't seem to mind. I wasn't expecting to have to stay up there that long, but watching how pretty the sunset looked from up there almost made everything else worth it. Aizawa briefly wonders at the slightly odd phrasing, but the class moves on. A few more jumping on Midoriya's trend of tree-climbing tales. Eri's eyes sparkle more and more with every story. By the time Hagakure regales them with a tale of how her preschool teacher thought Hagakure fell in an enclosure during a field trip to the zoo because Hagakure dropped her hat in a tiger pit, it took an hour and 6 pro heroes before anyone realized Hagakure was fine and had just gotten separated from her class in the reptile house and decided to wander around it until someone came back for her. She was so enraptured by the snakes in the reptile house that she didn't hear any of the commotion. There's no pillow fight, the activity having been vetoed out of concern it might be upsetting for Eri, before Aizawa could even step in and say absolutely not. Instead, they plan to watch an extra movie in its place. By the time they make it to the movie portion of the super sleepover extravaganza, Eri seems pretty well settled in, curled up in Midoriya's lap and nibbling on an apple fritter as some colorful animated movie plays. Seeing how much Eri's eyes sparkle at the musical numbers, Aizawa sighs and takes note of the title, knowing he's going to be watching it a lot in the near future. Eri, are you okay to stay? He asks in between musical numbers. Eri thinks it over and nods. Okay then, I'll see you in the morning. Or if you change your mind, or need me at any point, no matter what time it is, you can call me to come get you and I won't be mad, okay? I'll come no matter what it is or when you call. He holds her eyes until she nods, ducking her head and watching him from under her lashes with a shy smile. All right, he says, then glances up at Midoriya. The boy nods, firm and serious, and smiles that bright grin that Aizawa knows will one day light up countless hearts. Aizawa returns his nod and stands. He heads out to prepare for a short patrol with just one glance back at the warm lights of the dorm and the silhouettes of the kids within. He gets ready to go, performing equipment checks and undoing his spectacular makeover. He leaves the nail polish, deeming it too much of a hassle to take off. The pigtails and hair clips, however, must go. He can't sparkle like a disco ball under the streetlights, or every villain in the city will see him coming. Little does he realize, he doesn't get them all. One clip hides away under his hair until the moment he activates his quirk on a petty criminal. He doesn't realize what the guy is staring at with open-mouthed bafflement until the cop that comes to pick the guy up gives Aizawa the same bug-eyed look. Eraserhead, sir, you have an, The cop makes an absent flipping gesture at the side of his head. Aizawa reaches up and finds a scratchy piece of plastic under his fingers. He pulls it free. It's one of the gold glitter ones. He silently tucks it into one of his many pockets, maintaining eye contact with the cop. No one will believe you, he says, sending his capture weapon off to the roofs and flinging himself into the night. Despite the quiet worry simmering away during his entire patrol, the only texts he gets are the check-in messages from the class telling him everything is fine and Eri is having fun. A few are also accompanied by pictures of Eri. The last one is her passed out in Midoriya's lap. Midoriya is also asleep, arms wrapped around Eri and head tilted at almost 90 degrees back. Aizawa squints at it and then stifles a laugh as he realizes what he's looking at. Midoriya's hair looks like it somehow spawned more decorative clips. There's also ribbons now, and it looks like Aoyama let Eri loose on Midoriya with his makeup, if the heavily smeared lip gloss and glitter eyeshadow is any indicator. He saves the picture and sends it to Yagi without a single comment. Yagi sends back a "thank you so much," accompanied by a custom emoticon of the signature All Might smile, but weeping tears with sparkles surrounding it. Ridiculous man, Aizawa thinks as he stares at it, trying to comprehend what on earth possessed someone to make it, let alone for All Might to save it and use it. When he makes it back to campus, he drops in on the dorms, just to check in on them one last time. He finds each and every one of them sleeping in piles around the living room. Reminiscent of Shoji and Tokoyami's ill-fated snack run, only slightly more organized. Futons and blankets litter the floor. Furniture moved back to make room. Eri and Midoriya are still on the couch, Eri tucked safely in the pocket of space created by the back of the couch and the cradle of Midoriya's body. He can barely see her white hair peeking out from under the blanket wrapped around them, and realizes it's the group shot of Underground Hero blanket. He tries and fails to suppress his soft feelings when he realizes she's got a tight grip on the portion of the blanket painted with his image. Stepping away from the couch, Aizawa counts heads, makes sure everyone is sorted with blankets and pillows, turns off the TV, and slips back out the door. In his own room, he saves the butterfly clip out of his pocket and clips it to the shade of the lamp next to his bed, a private reminder of a warm memory. When he drops in on the dorms in the morning, and the common room is chaos. The class and Aerie are scattered between making breakfast, eating breakfast, and trying to clean up the mess. There's a spot on the wall that looks like someone threw a glitter bomb at it. Knowing Aoyama, that is entirely possible. Knowing his class, Aizawa is just glad it wasn't a more literal bomb. Kaminari is hopping on one foot, yelping, having stepped on a piece from one of the board games. Aoyama, Hagekure, and Ashido are packing away the makeup, sorting out what belongs to who. Jiro and Yayorozu are working together to fold all the blankets. Ojiro is rolling up the futons as the girls clear them. Kirishima and Shoji are carrying the packed-up futons and extra pillows up to storage. Ida is vacuuming the cleared floor space. Part of Aizawa cringes at the glitter and dust slurry surely infecting the vacuum. If taking care of Aerie has taught him anything, it's that absolutely nothing is going to get that glitter out. They'll be finding glitter years after 1A have graduated. Asui, Uraraka, and Koda are scouring the room with trash bags, picking up the bigger things Ida's vacuum can't get. The others are gathered around the tables, eating breakfast. Bakugo places a plate of pancakes covered in edible glitter in front of Aerie while trying to make eye contact with Midoriya. Midoriya, in turn, aggressively ignores him, focusing entirely on Aerie and his own breakfast. Greetings are called out one by one as the class notices him there. He yawns out his own greetings and seats himself at the table next to Midoriya and Aerie. "Have fun?" he asks Aerie. She nods, her mouth full of pancakes and her face covered in glitter and syrup. A mug of coffee is slid in front of him, and Aizawa looks up to see Bakugo, again trying and failing to catch Midoriya's eyes as Midoriya aggressively does not look at him. Don't like that, Aizawa thinks. These two have butted heads since day one, so Aizawa isn't exactly surprised there's a new tension between the two now. But this one is different. Bakugo doesn't seem to ever not be angry, so it isn't necessarily that Bakugo isn't angry. It's like it's not Bakugo's anger that's the driving force between this new tension, like it normally is. Midoriya shovels food into his mouth with single-minded focus, eyes on his plate like it's the only thing in the world. He can practically see Bakugo winding tighter and tighter towards an explosion as Midoriya stubbornly ignores him. "Thanks," he says, catching Bakugo's eyes. He glances quickly to Aerie and then looks back at Bakugo, giving him the smallest shake of his head. Bakugo huffs but drops his eyes, grunting out a "You're welcome," as he retreats back to the kitchen. Aizawa turns to level a questioning look at Midoriya, but he's not fast enough. "Aerie-chan, I'm gonna go for my run now that Aizawa-sensei is here, okay?" Aerie nods, mouth still stuffed with pancakes, and Midoriya is gone, sliding out of his chair, slipping his shoes on at the entryway, and escaping out the door so fast, Aizawa is a little surprised he doesn't hear the sound barrier crack or spy the telltale green flickers of Midoriya's quirk in action. Okay then, I guess he doesn't want to talk about it, Aizawa thinks. Aizawa isn't sure what set those two off again, but as long as they're not sneaking out after curfew to beat each other up, it must not be too bad. Aizawa sighs into his coffee, wishfully imagining tracking down their old teachers to string them up by the ankles and ask them what the hell they did to those two. He knows what happens to kids with so-called naturally heroic quirks. They're lifted up, put on a pedestal. But it's a double-edged sword. All kids need help sometimes, but kids with quirks like Bakugo and Midoriya are expected to somehow be perfect. to solve every problem and overcome every obstacle in their way without so much as a single hand helping pull them up. That's how Aizawa ends up with students like Midoriya, who never expects to be offered help and behaves like needing help is a personal failing. It also gives him students like Bakugo, who acts like being offered help is a personal attack and implodes if anyone finds out he actually needs it. Then there's the mess with Midoriya's quirk. Forget stringing up his teachers. Midoriya's quirk counselor is the one he really wants to get his hands on. Midoriya is by no means lazy, nor is he stupid, and Aizawa has more trouble with him putting too much effort in, rather than not enough. There's just no excuse for whatever bullshit caused the gross negligence of duty that eventually led to Midoriya walking into Aizawa's class with as much control over his limb-shattering quirk as a toddler. In one class period, Midoriya went from shattering limbs to breaking a single finger to use his quirk. Not good, but still definite progress. And proof that Aizawa's first impression that Midoriya is either incredibly lazy or incredibly stupid, and possibly both, is dead wrong. So if Midoriya is so willing to try, willing to put the effort in to get the results, why did no one ever even try to help the kid? And it's obvious they didn't, because if someone had, Midoriya would have walked into his class able to at least somewhat use his quirk. Why did it take at least a decade and getting into the best hero school in the country for Aizawa to do what Midoriya's quirk counselor should have done when Midoriya was a toddler? Whoever Midoriya's quirk counselor was, Aizawa wants their license, so he can personally set it on fire, followed by their head on a platter. Aizawa is distracted from his burgeoning rage by a tug on his sleeve. He looks down to see Eri looked at him with wide, worried eyes. He softens, packing up that rage-inducing train of thought for later. Sorry, just thinking about something too hard. Made myself mad. She searches his face for a moment before settling. Okay, she says, and goes back to her pancakes. Eri finishes eating while Aizawa is halfway through nursing his second cup of coffee. He nudges her towards the bathroom to get cleaned up. His eyes drift towards the kitchen, now empty of anyone but Bakugo. Might as well try to nip this in the bud if I can, he thinks, and downs the rest of his coffee to give himself an excuse to go to the kitchen. Bakugo's eyes flick to him as he comes in. Aizawa gives him a lazy blink and heads for the coffee pot. So, you and Midoriya. He watches Bakugo tense out of the corner of his eye. What's happening there? Nothing, Bakugo snaps, jerking the handle for the hot water and starting to clean up the breakfast dishes. Aizawa says nothing, silently watching and waiting. It takes a few minutes, but Bakugo eventually flicks his eyes over and finds Aizawa watching him with an unamused expression. He growls, frustrated, and furiously scrubs the pan in his hands. We're not fighting! Aizawa crosses his arms and raises his eyebrow. We're not! Bakugo bears harder down on the poor pan. It's a wonder it doesn't snap in half under the force of Bakugo's rage. Right, Aizawa says doubtfully. I'm trying to fucking apologize, okay? Bakugo snaps. Aizawa's eyebrows shoot so high they nearly vanish into his hairline. Apologize for the fight you're not having? Bakugo gets, if possible, even tenser. He keeps his eyes on the dishes, setting the pan he's torturing aside to rinse, and picking up a pot to torment instead. Aizawa doesn't rush him. We're not fighting! I realized I did some... Bakugo bites himself off, growling as he scrubs far harder than necessary. Aizawa waits for him to pick up again. I was an ass in middle school. So now I'm trying to apologize, and the fucker won't look at me and fucking hold still long enough for me to actually do it. Aizawa hums, picking up his coffee and taking a long drink to give himself time to mull that one over. Knowing what he knows about those two, plus the typical way society treats kids with powerful quirks. Aizawa can guess that they've likely had some nasty fights over the years. And between Midoriya's habit of avoiding anything negative, unless he's protecting someone, and Bakugo's general attitude, he can see them leaving things unresolved and trying to brush past it all. His first impulse is to grab them both by the collar and shake the problems loose. But he curbs it. It's better that they at least have the chance to resolve their own fights. He can't always be there to resolve things for them, after all. So even though he has a terrible feeling this will end badly, he just says, "Alright," and drinks his coffee. Bakugo squints at him. "Alright?" "I haven't gotten any notifications about you two punching your feelings out, so I'm assuming you two have had this at least somewhat in hand." Aizawa pauses as he flashes back to the last time they tried to resolve one of their issues. "But if that changes, tell me, or another teacher, or go to one of the counselors. Hound Dog is good at conflict resolution. Do literally anything other than get into a fist fight in the dead of the night again, or any other time. Don't fist fight over this at all, actually." Bakugo rolls his eyes. "Can't fight if he won't stop avoiding me, can I?" he grumbles. Aizawa takes a moment to look at Bakugo. The boy is rough, abrasive, and loud. But right now there's something almost small about him as he scrubs at the dishes like he's trying to sand a hole through them. Aizawa claps him on the shoulders and steps back. "It's Midoriya. He'll come around," Aizawa says as he retreats from the kitchen. He steps back out into the common room and surveys it. The cleanup seems to be going well. Ida is driving himself insane trying to vacuum up all the glitter. Aizawa can tell he's emptied the vacuum out at least once by the way so much glitter dusts his hand and clings to his front. He winces, imagining how insane Ida is going to drive himself trying to get rid of it all. As Ida attempts the impossible mission, Ashiro and Yaoyorozu consider the glitter smear on the wall, cleaning supplies in hand as they talk over how to best tackle it. Meanwhile, most of the other students, part of the first wave of cleanups, meander past Aizawa. He can hear stomachs growling, even as some, mostly Kaminari, whine about how hungry they are. The rest of the class gets to work finishing what the first group started. Aizawa watches, amused, as Sero gently pries the vacuum away from Ida and nudges him towards the kitchen. Shinzo takes over the cleaning of the glitter smear from Yaoyorozu and Ashiro. Sato, Shoto, and Tokoyami get to work putting the furniture back in their rightful places. It's a quiet, domestic scene. So why does he feel like something is wrong? He looks over the room again with a more careful eye and starts counting heads. He comes up short 6 students. I know where Midoriya is, but that still leaves Asui, Uraraka, Koda, and Aoyama, and Hagakure unaccounted for. He turns back to the kitchen. Where did the others get off to? He doesn't direct it towards anyone, but he's not surprised when it's Yaoyorozu and Ida who answer. Suyu-chan, Uraraka-san, and Koda-chan are taking the trash to the dumpster, starts Yaoyorozu. And Aoyama-san and Hagakure-san are putting the makeup away, Ida finishes. And Midoriya went on his morning run, Aizawa says. That's 20, so what's... His thoughts dissolve around a spike of panic as he finally places what's bothering him. His head jerks towards the table next to the kitchen. Several students are settling in to eat, but Aizawa's eyes move past them to Eri's empty chair. Where is Eri? The last he saw her, she was headed towards the bathroom to wash her hands. She should be back by now. The relaxed atmosphere vanishes as every eye jerks towards Eri's abandoned plate. Aizawa may have yelled, "Bomb!" "Eri!" he calls out. His nerves are rising, but even so, he forces himself to remember not to raise his voice, keeping his tone as calm as possible. But there's no answer, no tiny footsteps, no little head of white hair rushing towards him. Eri always comes when someone calls her. Always. He takes quick steps to the ground floor bathroom, knocking on the door and calling again. Eri! Still no answer. He opens the door and finds the room empty. The only sign Eri was ever here are faint traces of glitter clinging to the little stool she uses to reach the sink, with more smeared around the sink itself. He curses softly and rushes back to the common room. His students are busy pulling the common room apart looking for her, but they freeze, every eye turning to him when he returns. Did anyone see where she went? Head shake. Spread out. Start looking. He knows he's panicking, and it's stupid. Just because she isn't where she's supposed to be doesn't mean she's missing. But she didn't answer when he called her. And she always answers. Ashido-san, Juro-san, let's check the girls' side, Yayorozu says, running towards the stairs. The two girls follow her without hesitation. Ida takes over, rattling off names and sending the rest of the students scattering through the boys' side of the dormitory and down through the basement gym and utility rooms. I'll call Uraraka-san and have her get Tsuyu-chan and Koda-san to start looking outside, and Midoriya-kun, just in case she went after him. Don't worry, Sensei, we'll find her. Aizawa doesn't answer him, too caught up in his worry, but it doesn't seem like Ida is waiting for one, since he rushes off, phone at his ear, without waiting for Aizawa to respond. He's freezing up. He's a pro. He can't be, shouldn't be, freezing up. He's been in far higher stakes situations than one little girl wandering off. She probably just slipped out into the garden or something, and Aizawa is freaking out both himself and his class for no reason. Footsteps on the stairs have Aizawa's head jerking toward them, and he forgets his self-depreciating thoughts. Yagorozu comes rushing into view, practically tripping over her own feet. She's not up on the girl's side, but the others are going to check again. Yagorozu's eyes land on something over his shoulder and go wide as her breath audibly catches. Aizawa whips around. He sees the shoe first. A bright and shiny red that stands out against the green of the grass as it bounces to a stop underneath the large tree that shades most of the dorm's backyard. He looks up for what feels like a century until he spots her. Eri's feet kick at open air as she scrabbles for purchase, desperately clinging to a branch. Eri, he breathes, already moving. Aizawa runs for the door, eyes fixed on her. Before he can reach it, her eyes meet his, all panic and fear, as she loses her grip and drops. There's nothing calm about the way he screams, Eri! Distantly, he hears several students echo him. If he didn't know the glass is made to withstand a rocket fired at point-blank range, he'd go straight through it, damn the consequences. Instead, he's forced to wait precious time flinging the door open. He's never run so fast in his life. Eri screams. Maybe it's the falling. Maybe it's the fear. Maybe it's the hideous crack as she bounces off one of the thick branches. His eyes follow every movement, every bounce and breaking branch, as he calculates the distance between him and her and the ground. He's not going to make it. He can't make it. He pushes himself faster in defiance of that knowledge, even as he watches her body rush to meet the ground, already flinching in anticipation for the sound of impact. Instead, there's a flash of green, sparkling and bright as lightning and twice as fast, as Midoriya appears out of nowhere and dives for Eri, catching her so close to the ground that Aizawa is sure he must scrape his arms against the dirt. He wraps his body around her, protecting her as they go skidding across the garden, gorging a trail through the lawn. Aizawa has never been so glad to see the lightning crackle of Midoriya's quirk in his life. He hopes he never has to be so happy to see it again. I got you! It's okay! I got you, Eri-chan! It's okay! Midoriya babbles, cradling Eri close as she breathes tight, short breaths. One arm cradled close and the other tightly clutching Midoriya's shirt. Is she all right? Aizawa gasps out, dropping down next to the pair. Eri, are you all right? He asks before anyone can answer. I'm fine, she whispers. She's not quite crying like most children would be, but her eyes are bright and shiny with the threat of tears. Sensei, her arm, Midoriya says, face heartbroken. Eri, did you hurt your arm? He asks. She wilts and nods with a wet sniffle. It's best not to move her until we know her back and neck are okay, right? Should I call Recovery Girl? Yayorozu asks. Aizawa looks up to find the rest of the class hovering over them. Yes, Also, I need the... Before he can even finish his sentence, Ida is stepping forward, holding up the first aid kit. Yayorozu pulls out her phone and steps away to make the call. Aizawa opens his mouth to ask for an ice pack, then thinks better of it and just looks for Todoroki. He finds the boy already smoothing out a large hunk of ice into a more manageable shape, with Uraraka holding a towel to wrap it in. As his heart slowly stops trying to jump out of his chest, he takes a moment to be proud of his student. Aizawa gently wraps Eri's arm in a splint and accepts the towel-wrapped ice from Uraraka. It won't take Recovery Girl long to get here, so it isn't, strictly speaking, necessary to splint Eri's arm while they wait, but he'd rather be safe than sorry. He sends everyone but Midoriya, who can't move without shifting Eri, back inside to give Eri some space. They go, but he doesn't miss the way they leave the door open a sliver, or how often they pass by, but he lets it slide. It doesn't take long for Recovery Girl to arrive. She's gentle with Eri, leaving her customary white lab coat behind and using blue gloves instead of white, to avoid as many connections to overhaul as possible. The first thing Recovery Girl does is confirm Eri has no neck or spinal injuries. The second thing she does is examine Eri's arm. The third thing is lead Aizawa away to deliver the worst news so far. She has to go to the hospital. Aizawa's heart drops. There's no way to avoid it. Recovery Girl shakes her head, looking sad. It's a clean break, but she needs a cast. Children her age don't have enough stamina for me to heal a broken bone completely. And with her history, she has much less stamina than most. I don't dare risk it. They both know how Eri will react to the news. Recovery Girl wouldn't be saying this if she hadn't already considered and discarded all other options. Aizawa closes his eyes, jaw clenched. This is not going to go well, he thinks. She's not going to take it well. No, but we don't have a choice. Sensei, comes the ever-steady voice of Asui. Aizawa turns, Recovery Girl mirroring him. Asui stands off to the side, looking oddly fidgety. I have something that might help, if it's okay with you. Honestly, at this point, I'd take just about anything, even if it only helps a tiny bit. What is it? I know Eri-chan isn't great with being given fancy toys as gifts, but do you think it would still scare her if I let her borrow Patty-chan? Patty-chan? He asks. Asui nodded. He's my toy otter. I've had him since I was small, and he always went to doctor appointments with him. I grew out of needing him for that, but I would lend him to my siblings when they were scared. I think it might help Eri feel better about the trip, as long as you don't think it will scare her. A good idea. A risky one, but good. I promise he doesn't look anything like something they would have tried to give her. He's too well loved for that. It's worth a shot, Aizawa says hesitantly. Asui nods. I'll go get him while you break the news to Eri-chan. Explaining to Eri that she has to go to the hospital, a place that rightfully terrifies her, is one of the most painful things he's ever had to do. He watches, helpless to stop it, as she starts to tremble, tears beginning to run down her face, despite the way she bites her lip to try and hold them back. She's well on her way to a panic attack when Asui returns. Eri, still tucked folded tightly into Midoriya's arms, has her face buried in her hands as she breathes in fast little pants. They've tried to get her to follow their breaths, talk her down, but it isn't working. Asui crouches in front of Eri, holding a plush otter toy sewn into the classic teddy bear pose. The toy is, to put it politely, well-loved. It was probably a rich dark brown with a creamy belly at some point, but those colors have long since faded to mere shades of their former selves. The tail is floppy, but doesn't look like it's meant to be. The only stiff part of it left is the end, where it looks like someone tore chunks out of it and tried to clumsily sew it back up. The left forepaw and left ear have been replaced with bright green velvet and don't quite match their counterparts in size and shape. The velvet itself is worn smooth in places, evidence of many anxious hands. Its plastic nose has been rubbed free of its color everywhere but the very edges and the deepest dips. Its mismatched plastic eyes are slightly askew in a way that tells Aizawa they were hand-sewn in by an inexperienced hand. Asui crouches in front of Eri, holding the toy in front of her. With one hand, she manipulates a plush arm to reach out and gently pat Eri's head. "Oh no, what's wrong?" Asui asks, manipulating her voice into something higher and softer. Eri startles, opening her eyes and pulling her face out of her hands. Her eyes land on the toy and she goes still. Aizawa forces himself not to tense, knowing that even if she's not looking at him, Eri is paying attention to how he reacts. "I forgot to introduce myself." Asui makes the otter toy bap its soft paw onto its head, like it's gently slapping itself in the forehead. "Sorry, little one. My head is all full of fluff, so my memory isn't too good." Asui makes the toy tuck its arms in and bow. "Hello, my name is Patty-chan. I'm Suyu-chan's friend. It's nice to meet everyone," Asui says in Patty-chan's voice. Eri stares for a long moment, eyes flicking from Asui to the toy, and then from Aizawa, and back to the toy. "Hi, Patty-chan. My name is Midoriya Zuku. Nice to meet you," Midoriya says, shifting Eri in his lap so he can make a little bow back to the toy. Asui makes the toy bow to Midoriya. Then Asui turns the toy to face Aizawa. Eri is watching him. Midoriya has his biggest, pleading eyes on him. Asui's face is blank as ever, but the way she looks at him is expectant and imploring. The rest of the class has given up on pretense and is gathered around the sliding door. Aizawa meets Eri's teary eyes, full of confusion and looking to him for guidance. Goodbye, reputation, he thinks, and throws his pride into the trash. "Hello, Patty-chan. I'm Aizawa Shota. Pleased to meet you." He bows to the toy. Asui makes it bow back and chirps out a "Pleased to meet you" in the Patty-chan voice. She turns the otter back to face Eri and makes it tilt its head and lift one paw to its face as if it's curious. I'm Eri. Pleased to meet you." She gives the toy a little unsure bow. Looking to Aizawa, he nods to her and she relaxes, looking back to the toy. Asui makes Patty-chan clap its paw together. "Oh, you're Eri-chan! Suyu-chan says you're very nice." Eri blushes and drops her eyes. "But you seem very sad right now. Eri-chan, what happened?" I fell and got hurt, and now I have to go somewhere bad." Tears gather in Eri's eyes again, and a fine tremble runs through her. Asui makes Patty-chan gasp, little plush paws coming to its mouth. "The hospital?" she makes the toy ask. Eri blinks back tears, face miserable, and nods. "Oh no, Eri-chan, that sounds really scary." Asui makes the toy shiver violently. Eri drops her eyes to her lap. "It sounds as scary as the time I had to go to the teddy bear hospital." Eri glances up, eyes widening. "Toys go to the hospital too?" Asui makes the toy nod. "I was playing with Suyu-chan, and when I fell out of her bag and a really big dog grabbed me." Eri gasps. "I was so scared, but Suyu-chan rescued me and took me home. Then her mom sent me to the teddy bear hospital." "Well, why couldn't they just fix you at home?" Eri asks, eyes flickering to Aizawa for the briefest second and her voice breaking on the word home. Aizawa feels his heart threaten to crack in half. "Well," Asui makes Patty-chan tap its chin, "I suppose it was because I was hurt so bad that I needed more help than usual. See, look at my paw." Asui makes Patty-chan lift the arm with the green paw up. "That silly dog messed up my paw so bad they had to replace it. My ear, too." Asui makes Patty-chan reach up to touch its mismatched paw to its mismatched ear. Did it hurt?" Eri asks softly. "A little, but not as much as staying hurt would've." Clever, Aizawa thinks, pride swelling at his student's clever plan. Eri fidgets. It's still scary, though. Asui makes Patty-chan nod and droop theatrically. It is, isn't it? There's gotta be some way to make it less scary. Asui makes Patty-chan mime, thinking hard, plush arms crossed. Patty-chan, I have an idea, Asui says in her own voice. She makes the toy turn to her and say, What is it, Tsuyu-chan? Remember how when my siblings were small, they'd always get scared of going to the doctor? Of course! I always used to go back with them until they weren't scared to go anymore. Oh, Tsuyu-chan, that's brilliant! Only if Eri-chan wants to, of course. Of course! Asui turns Patty-chan back to face Eri. Eri-chan, you know I used to help Tsuyu-chan and her siblings when they were too scared to go to the doctor. So what if I went to the hospital with you? Tsuyu-chan won't mind if you borrow me for a few hours. When you're scared, you can hug me as tight as you need, and it won't hurt me at all. It's true, Midoriya says when Eri hesitates. Soft toys like Patty-chan are great for hugging when you're scared. It's like they soak up the fear. If Rapi-san is really okay with it, I could just to borrow? Of course, I don't mind at all, Eri-chan. Asui passes Patty-chan over to Eri. Midoriya helps Eri adjust her grip so she's holding the toy tight in a one-armed hug. Eri squeezes the toy and lets out a shaky breath, settling. It works, she whispers, eyes widening. Aizawa allows himself the luxury of feeling relieved. Thank you, Frappy-san. Asui smiles, eyes crinkling shut. You're welcome, Eri-chan. He manages to get Eri into the car and to the hospital. Even with her face buried in Patty-chan's fur and never straying from either his arm or Midoriya's, Eri is terrified and miserable. But she doesn't shut down, which is all he can hope for. The hospital is at least smart enough to assign Eri a doctor who worked with her during her post-rescue stay, which helps. But mostly it's Patty-chan helping the most. Eri spends as much time as possible hiding her face in its fur and hugging it as best she can with one usable arm. It's leagues better than Aizawa was expecting, but most importantly, there's an unexpected boon that comes from the trip. Since her rescue, Eri has not once asked for anything. Ever. So when the doctor tells Aizawa and Midoriya that they need to wait outside, he takes one look at her fearful face and gets ready to argue. Then Eri, shaking like a leaf, head down as she hides behind the toy, lifts Patty-chan up and says, Dr-san, hello, I'm Patty-chan, and Eri wants Eraserhead-sensei and Deku-san to stay. Her voice shakes as much as she does, but he can tell she's trying to mimic the voice Asui used when Patty-chan was talking. He can hear Midoriya muffle a gasp, and knows if he looks over at him now, the boy will be biting back happy tears. The doctor's eyes widen and flick to Aizawa. He can't take his eyes off Eri, hiding behind Patty-chan's, but still taking this enormous step forward in spite of her fear. Pride fills him, and he wonders at the resilience of this child who has suffered so much. He's not the hugging kind, but if Asui were here right now, he thinks the impulse would be too strong for him to overcome. Of course, says the doctor, knowing what a breakthrough this is for Eri. Surprise and relief wore on Eri's face. She tucks Patty-chan back under her chin. As the doctor continues her work, Aizawa looks over to find Midoriya biting his lip, an enormous grin wobbling on his face, and tears flowing freely down his cheeks. Silently, Aizawa grabs a tissue box off the counter and hands it to him, squeezing his shoulder and nodding when the boy grins up at him. It's like a dam breaking. Patty-chan asks for all the things Eri is too scared to. He's not happy Eri was hurt and has to face something that scares her so badly, but he's not sorry she got this breakthrough. They leave the hospital with Eri's broken arm encased in a bright red cast, something that nearly brought Midoriya to tears again. She's so worn out that he has to carry her to the car, but even nodding off, she keeps a firm grip on Patty-chan. Aizawa makes no move to slip the toy away from her, even when she falls asleep before they even get to the car. Eri sleeps through the drive back, and Aizawa is carrying her onto campus, but begins to stir as they approach 1A's dorm. Aizawa means to carry her past it to the teacher's building, but that plan crumbles when he spots wisps of smoke far too close to 1A's dorm for his liking. He knows Midoriya spots it at the same time as he does, because the boy vanishes in a rush of green sparks before Aizawa can tell him to stay with him. Eri quickly wakes the rest of the way up when Aizawa begins to run. He's nearly there when Midoriya returns in another rush of green sparks. "It's not the building," he says. "Then what is it?" Midoriya freezes and shifts awkwardly. It's best you see for yourself." Aizawa flips through ideas of what on earth his problem class could possibly have gotten up to in the few hours he was gone, with the main source of chaos with him. One idea in particular stands out. They didn't. They did. Todoroki stands in the courtyard, steadily icing the burning crater where the tree Eri fell from once stood. Smoke twines up from the hole. Embers protesting as they're smothered by the ice. Todoroki looks up. You're back. What happened? Todoroki looks at the smoking crater and then back at his teacher. I'm supposed to tell you it was an accident. Only the fact that his hands are occupied holding Eri stops him from planting his face in them. He opens his mouth, but before he can get a word out, the door to the courtyard flies open and a stream of students pour out. "They're back!" Kirishima yells, loudest amidst the excited exclamations from the crowd. Eri squirms slightly, and Aizawa reluctantly puts her down, hovering just in case she's too tired to stand. Asui squeezes her way to the front. "That's a very pretty cast, Eri-chan." Eri smiles shyly, tucking her face down into Patty-chan's fur. "It's red, just like Deku-chan's shoes." Behind her, Midoriya buries his bright red face in his hands. Uraraka comes up beside him to pat his shoulder, grin teasing. Asui nods. "You're right, they're exactly the same." With a mischievous glint in her eyes, she turns to Midoriya and says, "Midoriya-chan should sign it for her." Midoriya makes a sound like a deflating balloon. The whole class starts voicing their agreements. Eri grabs Aizawa's pants and he looks down at her. "What do they mean?" she asks. "It's a common thing for people to sign someone's cast, especially friends or family." Eri's eyes sparkle and she fidgets, holding Patty-chan up in front of her and turning towards Midoriya. She says, "Deku-san, will you please sign Eri-chan's cast?" A wave of surprise and excitement moved through the class. Chiro slams a hand over Kaminari's mouth before he can let out an excited exclamation. And Bakugo, standing at the edge of things, quickly snags Kirishima in a headlock to keep him from yelling in excitement. Uraraka bounces with excitement, grabbing Ida's arm and shaking it so violently his whole body sways. An enormous smile grows on Midoriya's face, and his eyes shine, that slight edge of too shiny that always precludes his tears. But he keeps them held back and says, "Of course! I'd love to!" in a choked-up voice. Before he can do more than shift, looking for something to do the actual signing with, Yayarozu is there. She pulls out a thick black marker from her arm, perfect for the uneven surface of the cast. He grins at her and thanks her. Midoriya writes his hero name out onto Eri's cast in thick, blocky kanji. It kinda big. Sorry, Eri-chan, I don't have a lot of practice signing casts." Midoriya bites his list. Eri shakes her head. No, it's perfect. I love it. Thank you. Someone muffles a squeal. She glances shyly at Aizawa. He holds his hand out and Midoriya hands him the marker. He signs her classed, obeying Patty-chan's request to sign a little far away from the big Deku, so Eri can save it when the cast comes off. Ashido, clearly at her limit, blurts out, Eri-chan, can we all sign it? I promise we won't mess up your Deku signature. Or your Eraserhead one. He's underground, so it'll be even more valuable than Midoriya's will be, Shinzo said. Aizawa gives him a narrow-eyed glare, but the little brat just grins. He also pretends not to see Midoriya give Eri's cast a longing look. Eri shyly accepts. Yaoyorozu goes first, drawing black rectangles around the Deku and the Eraserhead to keep them safe before signing herself. Signature by signature, Eri's cast fills up, until the only empty spaces are the safety rectangles around the Deku and the Eraserhead signatures. By the time they're done, Eri is struggling to stay awake. Okay, I think it's time for a nap, Aizawa says, bending down to pick Eri up. I have to pay the jar first. Because, Eri yawns, dripping a little bit more. Because I said I was fine, but I wasn't. She doesn't. She's not part of 1A. But at the same time, he's not going to discourage her from practicing a good habit. All right, he says, and carries her to the dorm kitchen. He pulls the jar within her reach as she sleepily pries herself from his shoulder. Can I? She shifts and pulls Patty-chan, still tucked against her chest, forward, and shifts her voice higher. Can Eri-chan borrow yen for the jar, please? She asks through Patty-chan. Of course, Aizawa says as he fumbles for his wallet. He gets the coins out for Eri and hands them to her. She carefully slides them through the slot in the lid. They join the rest, and he carries her from the kitchen. I have to give Patty-chan back to Asui. She'll miss him. Aizawa doesn't think Eri is going to manage to stay awake that long, but he stops and starts looking for Asui anyway. Sure enough, by the time he finds her out in the courtyard, helping turn the crater where the tree once stood into a small pond, Eri is out cold. She wanted to return Patty-chan, he says, gently tugging the toy free and holding it out to Asui. Thank you for lending it to her. Asui nods and takes it, tucking it into the crook of her own arm. I'm glad he could help. Maybe there's some way to safely get her a stuffed toy of her own, since Patty-chan helped so much. If not, she's welcome to borrow Patty-chan again. Aizawa hums and nods. I'll have to look into it. Thank you again. The next day in class, before he can do more than take roll, Ida stands and bows sharply to him. Aizawa-sensei, the class wanted to apologize to you for letting Eri get hurt under our care. We're sorry for letting you down. The rest of the class stands and bows as well. There's more than a few curled shoulders in the crowd. I should have seen this coming, he thinks, considering he's struggling not to blame himself for not keeping a close enough eye on her. Of course his class is blaming themselves. Sit down, he says, trying to sound at least a bit gentler than usual. There's no need to apologize. Eri is fine. The class hesitates. But if we'd paid more attention... Is it my fault too, then? Ida blanches. No, sensei, of course not! A wave of denial follows him from the class. Aizawa nods. Then it can't be any of your faults either. You can't prevent every bad thing from happening. You can only control how you react to them. And every single one of you reacted perfectly. Ida, Yaoyorozu, you both organized the class quickly. The rest of you fell in line perfectly, listening to your leadership without wasting time on arguments, which is more than I can say for a lot of pros. If you all hadn't been so fast, Midoriya wouldn't have been called back fast enough to catch her and prevent her from being hurt a lot worse. He doesn't need to remind him how close of a call that was. One wasted second, and he doesn't really want to think about how much worse it could have been. I have to say it, don't I? Ugh, fucking emotions. Disgusting. I'm proud of you all for how well you handled this. Yaoyorozu performs an incredible feat of bursting into tears before Midoriya. Several other students follow them. Fuck, he thinks. Okay, alright, God damn it, I only have one tissue box, what was I thinking? He grabs the box and all but throws it at Ida. Ida, pass these out to whoever needs them. I'm moving forward with homeroom. Ida removes a few tissues and tucks them into his pocket. Midoriya pulls a small tissue box out of his bag and shares them with the students near him. Well, that makes sense. Thank fuck. Yaoyorozu, still crying heavily, starts pulling individual tissues from her shirt and passing them to the students near her. Thank you, Sensei, croaks Yaoyorozu, sounding more like Asui than herself. You're welcome, he says awkwardly. Don't mention it. Literally, don't. We're pretending this never happened. Kaminari, sniffling with sparks flickering, raises his hands and says, Are you still... Yes. Now pretend this never happened. We have homeroom business to get to. But apparently, at least one of his students don't understand what pretend this didn't happen means. If Hisashi's relentless teasing is any indicator, as Hisashi gleefully recounts what the students told him to the rest of the teachers, Aizawa zips his sleeping bag over his face and plots what he's going to do with the students who blabbed. He already knows what he's going to do to get back to Hisashi. I just need a good enough bribe to get Nedzu to let me use the misprinted banana mic design. This has been Buggy Cass, your coffee aunt, coming at you with part 2 of what is apparently going to be a part 3 series. I had only intended it being a 2-part series, but, time got away from me. These chapters are longer than they looked. Well, 9 and 10 have been recorded, so that will be up as soon as my editing is finished. Let's hope you enjoy it. I have an amazing fan art and some funny bloopers to show you at the end of that. Have a great night, my nibblings, and see you later.